Have you ever noticed how often you explain yourself, not because someone asked, but because some part of you feels like it has to? As if every no, every moment of rest, every breath of solitude has to come with a backstory, just to prove you're allowed to exist. It's like there's an invisible courtroom following you everywhere, where you're both the defendant and the judge, trying to justify your tiredness, defend your silence, rationalize your need for space. You begin to apologize for things that shouldn't need apology. I'm sorry I didn't go. I'm sorry I'm not enough today. I'm sorry I need this moment. And the more you talk, the further you drift from yourself. We grow up in a world that trains us to please, to bend, to shrink, to smile so no one feels discomfort around our truth. We become fluent in self-defense. We sculpt our emotions into tidy little arguments, trying to earn the right to feel. But eventually, something inside you whispers, enough. Enough of filtering yourself just to be digestible. Enough of turning your feelings into evidence. Enough of mistaking silence for surrender, when sometimes silence is a rebellion, a sacred boundary, a quiet, powerful truth that says, I don't need you to validate my voice anymore. What if real self-love starts the moment you stop explaining yourself? Have you ever asked why you over-explain? It's not a habit. It's a wound, a scar etched deep from when you were small, when the fear of being misunderstood felt like exile. So, you began tiptoeing through life, monitoring every word, every gesture, hoping not to be too much, too loud, too real. Be quiet. Don't make a scene. If you act like that, no one will love you. Those echoes became roots, and those roots grew vines, twisting around your voice, choking your authenticity, blurring your joy. You started to live like you're constantly on trial for simply being here. But here's the thing. It's not your fault. You learned this to survive. In a world that shames vulnerability and rewards perfection, you wore the mask they gave you. But every mask suffocates, eventually. Because living to be understood is a slow and silent kind of death. And still, beneath all of that, you remain. You, raw, radiant, unpolished, deserve to be here. Not because you're easy to understand, but because you're real. You have the right to exist, even if no one ever gets you. You have the right to feel, without dressing your emotions up in logic. Maybe your fear of being misunderstood isn't weakness. Maybe it's just an old echo from a time when no one cared enough to listen. We think speaking frees us, but sometimes speaking becomes our cage. Every explanation a bar. Every please understand me another lock. And before you know it, your words aren't self-expression anymore. They're protection, a shield, a survival strategy. And that's what drains you. That's what turns your soul heavy. That's what dims the light in your eyes. Explaining yourself all the time. It feels like you're on trial every day. And not just on trial. You're the defendant, the defense attorney, and the judge. All in one body, fighting for permission to simply feel. You start editing your emotions, softening your truths, translating your heart just to be acceptable, just to be heard. But even then, they don't believe you. They don't see you. They never really hear you. Have you ever felt that? Speaking from fear is like trying to hold back a hurricane with bare hands and a hopeful heart. The words tremble. They fall apart before they land. And your heart, so brave, so open, is still left standing alone. Your soul knows the difference. It knows when you're speaking from love and when you're speaking from the fear of not being enough. And deep down, You know it too. You feel it in your throat, in your gut, in your chest. That's where the truth lives. And sometimes that truth whispers something hard, but freeing. No matter how much you explain, those who don't want to understand you never will. Not because of who you are now, but because they never tried to see you from the start. So maybe it's time. Time to stop talking just to be accepted. Time to stop offering your pain as proof that you deserve space. Maybe it's time to be quiet, not out of defeat, but out of self-respect. There is a kind of silence that doesn't punish. It shelters. It holds you, not with emptiness, but with sacred presence. This is not the silence that screams inside your chest, not the kind that aches to be broken. This silence asks for nothing. It demands nothing. It simply is. It sits beside you like a soft witness to all you've carried. And in its stillness, you might finally feel what it means to be completely seen, with no performance, no justification, no script. This silence doesn't interrogate your sadness. It doesn't dissect your fears or demand you to be okay. It just whispers, you don't need to explain. Just rest. And in that moment, your soul breathes again. Because speaking from your wounds can wear you down. But silence, when chosen, not forced, becomes medicine. Not the kind that numbs, but the kind that heals. The kind that brings you home. And in that sacred space, where you finally stop justifying your existence, something remarkable happens. You begin to hear a quieter voice, one that has always lived within you. Your truth, your intuition, your essence. And suddenly, the sharp edges of pain soften. Resentment melts into quiet clarity. The need to be validated dissolves. And in its place, you find something far more powerful. The permission to simply be. To be silent is not to disappear. It is not to give up. It is not to hide. To be silent, in its truest, most powerful form, is to come home to yourself. To look inward and say without a word, I see you. I believe you. I choose you. Because not everything has to be understood. Not everything is meant to be explained. Some emotions are sacred. Some truths live beyond language. And sometimes, your silence isn't avoidance. It's self-protection. A boundary wrapped in softness. And sometimes, the people you try so hard to explain yourself to never deserved the explanation to begin with. So, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and allow yourself to listen, not with your ears, but with your whole being. Listen without preparing a reply. Listen like your soul has been waiting for the quiet. Because maybe, just maybe, in that stillness, your true journey back home begins. Not home as a place, but home as a feeling. A return to the version of you that doesn't abandon herself just to be loved. When was the last time you chose yourself without apologizing for it? Can you even remember? Or has it become so normal to come last, so familiar to seek worth through someone else's eyes, that you've forgotten what it means to put your hand on your heart and say, me, first, and without guilt? Because choosing yourself isn't selfishness, it's survival. It's an act of radical self-respect. It's standing in front of the mirror and saying, no more. No more shrinking. No more explaining. No more twisting myself into a shape that fits someone else's comfort. And yes, I know how hard it is. Truly, I do. Because we were taught to be easy, to be nice, to be agreeable, to keep the peace even when our own world was burning. So when you finally say no, without dressing it in soft language, without attaching an explanation, something shifts. The ground under you trembles. Masks fall. people leave. Some grow cold. Some grow distant. Because you are no longer the version of you they created for their convenience. And yes, that hurts. It cuts to be misunderstood. It stings to be abandoned by the very ones who once said, "I see you." But here's the truth. What remains after that is real. What stays after that is freedom. What rises from that is rebirth. Choosing yourself is an act of courage, because it means letting go of the part of you who waited and waited to be chosen by someone else. It means burying the need to explain every scar, every silence, every step of your healing. And yes, it's terrifying, because sometimes choosing yourself means standing alone for a while. But let me tell you, from the quietest, deepest corner of my truth, that solitude isn't punishment. It's purification. It's sacred ground. The place where you begin again, where you remember your worth was never a question that needed someone else's answer. There's a quiet kind of power in saying, "Today, I don't owe an explanation. Today, I honor myself." Even if no one notices, even if no one claps, it remains one of the holiest things you will ever do for your soul. But let's not pretend it's easy, because for many of us, silence was never a choice. It was a survival mechanism, a silence born not of peace, but of fear. The kind of silence that doesn't soothe, it suffocates. It wraps around your throat like a knot, a belief that if you speak, you'll be punished. You'll be dismissed. You'll lose something. And yes, sometimes speaking does hurt, but staying silent when the silence is rooted in fear, that's what truly wounds you. Have you ever felt it? That choking silence, the kind where you bite down on your truth just to avoid the ripple it might cause. The kind where you bury your feelings, not because they aren't valid, but because someone else might find them uncomfortable. That kind of silence is like swallowing glass, invisible, but sharp enough to break you from the inside. And the worst part? You adapt. You master the art of hiding. Smiling when your body is begging to scream. Saying, "I'm fine," while your chest trembles under the weight of pretending. Projecting calm while chaos roars beneath your skin. But let's be clear. Silence born from fear is not peace. It is a quiet war. And the battlefield? Your body, your mind, your heart, and that war, day after day, drains you. It dulls your glow. It whispers lies like, "You don't deserve space. You don't deserve to be heard. You're too much. Stay small." Eventually, you start to lose touch with what you even feel, because when you silence yourself long enough, you forget your own language. So, what's the difference between silence that heals and silence that destroys? Just one word: intention. The silence that heals says, "I choose me." The silence that destroys says, "I'm not enough to be heard." One is power, the other is fear. But hear me, you are worthy. Worthy of spaces where your voice doesn't need to defend itself, where it simply exists, where you are met with presence, not judgment. And if you haven't found those spaces yet, be that space. Be the one who listens to your own soul. Be the one who lets your heart speak and also lets it rest when silence is what self-love looks like. One day, and you may not even realize when, something inside you will quietly shift. Not out of rage, not in sorrow, but in a sacred calm. Something will break, not to destroy you, but to set you free. And you'll say, maybe only to yourself, "Enough." No performance, no explanation, just truth, just peace. And that day will change you forever, because you'll finally understand you don't owe anyone an explanation, not out of arrogance, but out of wisdom. Because those who truly love you, who truly see you, they don't need you to justify your existence. That day will be quiet, holy, a day where you simply choose not to answer every question, not to explain every boundary, not to dilute your soul into words others can digest. Because constantly explaining yourself is just another form of begging. Begging for permission to feel, to rest, to be. But here's the truth. No one else holds that permission. They never did. Only you can set yourself free. To stop explaining doesn't mean you're closing down. It means you're opening up. Finally, fully, to your own truth, to your intuition, to the part of you that knows not every decision has to make sense. It just has to feel right. Because the choices that come from your soul aren't always logical, but they are always honest. And real truth never needs a reason. That's when you realize silence is not emptiness. It's fullness. It's a whole, unwavering presence. It's the sacred moment you whisper to the world, I no longer live to be understood. I live to simply be. And from that place, you begin to draw in new people. People who don't explain themselves either, because they just feel you. They resonate. They respect your energy. And that is freedom. Some wounds don't bleed, but they speak. Loudly, relentlessly, without your permission. They speak even when you beg them to stay silent. They speak in moments of stillness, in sudden overreactions, in the quiet need to explain everything. Not because you're dramatic, but because you're afraid. Afraid that if you don't explain, the pain will come back. The abandonment will return. But here's the truth. It's not your voice asking to be heard. It's your wound. Do you remember the first time you said, "This hurts," and someone told you, "You're overreacting"? When you asked for love and they labeled you as needy? That's when it started. That's when your soul learned that being heard required proof. That being felt meant performing pain. So you started repeating yourself over and over, hoping maybe this time someone would see you. Someone would stay. The truth is, you never wanted to talk that much. You just wanted one voice, even one, to say, you don't have to explain. I see you. You wanted to feel safe being exactly who you are. You wanted to be accepted without needing to wear a script. So you spoke, not to get attention, but to stop the silence from feeling like rejection. Every word became a quiet plea. Can you see me now? Do you get me now? Will you leave me again? But here's what sets you free. The person who doesn't want to see you never will. No matter how perfectly you phrase it, no matter how loudly you scream. And the one who truly wants to see you doesn't need words. Because soul recognizes soul. And that doesn't need to be explained. It's simply felt. So, take a breath. Not the shallow kind, but the kind that reaches your center. Turn inward. Speak only when your heart wants to, not when your wound demands it. Because you are not your explanations. You are the truth behind them, the clarity beneath the noise. There is a kind of exhaustion that sleep can't fix. It's not in your body. It's in your being. It comes from years of defending yourself, from trying to be understood by people who never truly wanted to listen. Have you ever felt that? That moment where you open your heart and all you get is silence, or worse, judgment. That sharp ache when you share your scars and receive apathy in return. And yet, what hurts more is not their coldness. It's the echo of your soul feeling invisible all over again. So, little by little, you start to dim. You stop sharing. Not because you have nothing left to say, but because you finally realize some places were never meant to hold your truth. The soul grows weary when it's ignored, when it speaks and is met with mockery, dismissal, or silence. That's when many of us learn to be quiet, not by choice, but for safety. Because sometimes it feels less painful to stay silent than to risk not being heard again. But that's not healing. That's hiding. That's folding your pain and sliding it under the rug of your soul. And one day, that rug will lift, and everything you buried will ask to be seen. So today, I don't ask you to explain yourself. I ask you to pause, to hold yourself, close your eyes, and ask gently, where did I exhaust myself trying to be heard? When did I stop listening to my own soul? And what do I need now to begin again, softly, truthfully, lovingly? Because that's where healing begins, not when the world finally hears you, but when you finally stop demanding explanations from yourself. We live in a world that demands smiles, a world allergic to real, raw, unfiltered emotion, a world that wants you to say, I'm fine, even when you're shattering inside. And slowly, without even noticing, you start justifying your sadness. You start offering explanations for why you're not okay, as if grief needs a permission slip, as if your heartbreak needs a signature to be valid. But pain doesn't need to be explained. It needs to be honored. Your tears aren't a weakness to be rationalized away. They're a sacred language, and you don't owe anyone a translation. You don't have to dress up what's breaking in polite language. Pain isn't seeking approval. It's seeking presence. It wants room. It wants breath. It wants your arms, not your arguments. And here's the saddest part. Pain often grows louder not because of what it is, but because of how often you feel you must defend its existence. I'm just tired, you say. It's been a rough week. Sorry, it's just stress. These aren't truths. They're apologies in disguise. They're little lies, dressed up to avoid discomfort, to stay palatable, to seem strong in a world that equates emotion with failure. But feeling doesn't make you weak. Denying what you feel, that's what breaks you. So today, just feel, without guilt, without packaging it, without turning it into a story others will understand, because your soul already knows. It's been waiting for you to stop fighting against your own depth. Make silence your temple. And in that sacred space, let your pain speak. Without shame, without filter, without fear. That's where true freedom begins. There's a silent belief that lives in many wounded hearts. If I show all of me, I'll finally be loved more. So we open up. We reveal the rawest parts. We hand over our truths like offerings, hoping someone will hold us tighter for being honest. But not everyone is built to hold your truth. Not everyone has the sensitivity to carry what you've carried for years. And most painfully, not everyone deserves to. Your truth is sacred. It's not a campaign. It's not a product. It's not a performance. Your truth is a fire. And fire can illuminate, or it can burn. It all depends on where you place it. And too many times, in the name of love, in the name of connection, you've given yourself to people who couldn't hold you. People who turned your softness into strategy. Who used your openness as a weapon. Who saw your honesty and labeled it too much. So you shut down. You built walls. You swore, never again. But here's the thing. The pain didn't come from trusting. It didn't come from opening. The pain came from giving your truth to those who never earned it. Learning to choose who gets to hear your truth is an act of self-love. It's saying, my story isn't for just anyone. It's for those who know how to honor it. Because there are people who want to know you just to control you. and people who listen just to protect you. The difference isn't in their words, it's in their energy, their presence, their intention. Not everyone deserves your silence, and not everyone deserves your voice. Both are sacred, both are gifts. So don't punish yourself for opening up in the past. But from now on, open only in places where your soul feels safe. Sometimes, talking too much becomes a kind of forgetting, a beautiful distraction, a lifelong performance to avoid feeling what's really inside. Because while you talk, analyze, explain, justify, you drift away from yourself. You dissolve. You shrink into what others expect. You abandon your own center. But when you choose silence, not the silence that is forced upon you, but the silence that you choose, something begins to align. The chaos begins to calm. The puzzle pieces begin to click. Because sacred silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the return of your own voice to its rightful home. Silence, at this depth, is not escape, it's return. It's tuning back in to the voice the world drowned out, the soft, persistent truth that has always whispered beneath the noise, the voice of your soul. And in that silence, something clicks. You suddenly remember you have nothing to prove. You are not here to explain. You are not here to perform. You are here to be. External judgment fades. The need to be understood melts away. And in that stillness, certainty rises. Clarity settles in your bones. You finally see. Your worth doesn't live in how well you explain your pain. It lives in how deeply you allow yourself to feel it. So silence becomes your medicine, a mirror, a homecoming. You begin to see. Everything you were searching for out there was waiting for you right here. Quiet, steady, loving. You go quiet, not because you're lost, but because you're finally found. Quiet to remember, quiet to return, quiet to heal. Because sometimes the road back to yourself begins with one sacred silence. And then comes a moment, almost unnoticeable to the world, but revolutionary to your soul, when something inside you shifts. No screams, no drama, just a calm, rooted decision. I won't beg anymore. Not out of pride, not out of coldness, but because dignity has finally stood up. Because self-love has finally risen from the floor it knelt on for far too long. Yes, you've begged. You begged with explanations, with apologies you didn't owe, with kindness that concealed your pain, with anxious silence that pleaded to be noticed. You begged by being too patient, by being too understanding, by pretending everything was okay. But your soul remembers. It remembers every time you dimmed your light so you wouldn't be too much. Every time you twisted yourself into someone else's comfort. Every time you explained and explained and explained just to be enough. And then one day, you choose yourself. Not from anger, but from love. A love so deep, so holy, it refuses to keep giving away pieces of you to people who never knew what to do with them. Because the soul that finally chooses itself doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't explain. It walks. It walks with memory, not resentment. With boundaries, not revenge. With its heart in hand, not to give it away, but to finally hold it. And in that step, everything changes. Not out there, but in here. Silence becomes your companion. Solitude becomes your sanctuary. And you become your own safe place. To convince, what a heavy word, when it's born from fear. Convince someone that you're enough. That your love isn't a burden. That your wounds aren't too much. It's a dance that empties you. A loop that never ends. What if I say it better? What if I soften it more? What if I change, just enough, for them to stay. But every time you do, you betray yourself. You leave pieces behind. You reshape your truth so it fits into someone else's comfort zone. You water down your intensity, your tenderness, your truth, just to be tolerable. And what ends up hurting the most isn't the rejection. It's the fact that you had to stop being yourself just to avoid it. Until one day, you're not angry at them. You're just done with the version of you who keeps bending. You look at your reflection and finally admit, this isn't me. And your soul makes a promise. Never again. No more begging to be seen by someone who closes their eyes on purpose. No more translating yourself into a language you were never meant to speak. No more shrinking to fit into places you've outgrown. And from that day forward, your words grow fewer, but truer. You only speak from the core, and if they don't understand, that's okay. Because your truth isn't meant to be debated, it's meant to be lived. And whoever has a soul will feel it. So now, lower your voice, not from fear, but like someone guarding a treasure. Your truth doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be aimed, rooted, alive. There is no act more intimate, more powerful than the moment you decide to go quiet. And in that silence, you finally choose yourself. Not out of surrender, but out of self-respect. Not because you're afraid of the response, but because you finally stopped chasing one. You now know some battles are not won with words. Some truths don't need defense. Some freedom begins exactly when you let go. Because silence can say everything. I owe you nothing. I don't need your permission to exist. What I know about myself is enough. And that is a quiet revolution. For years, they taught you that your value came from being understood, that your worth was tied to how clearly you could explain your feelings, that love had to be earned by being reasonable, logical, polite. But no one ever told you. Your worth also lives in your silence, that your voice still breathes even when it rests, that you are still whole even when you stop explaining. And so, in that silence, something beautiful begins. A reunion with yourself, a rebirth of your truth, a reconciliation with your own soul. You stop convincing. You stop pleasing. You stop apologizing. And what you start craving is peace. But peace doesn't raise its voice. Peace doesn't argue. Peace doesn't beg to be believed. Peace enters the moment you stop bargaining with your own truth. So yes, silence is an act of love, of power, of maturity. Silence to stop betraying yourself. Silence to break the cycle. Silence because you finally chose you. And in that holy private moment, healing begins. So let me ask you now, how many times have you broken just to be understood? How many times have you drowned in explanations no one even asked for, just to not feel rejected? How many times have you muted your essence, hoping it would make them love you more? But now, look how far you've come. Look how much strength lives in your silence. How beautiful it is to no longer need to explain who you are. Maybe healing doesn't happen when you finally say everything. Maybe it happens when you no longer feel the need to say anything at all. Maybe the soul isn't starving for words. Maybe it's starving for presence. It wants you to stay, to hold yourself, to choose you, even if no one else ever does. This video was a space, a soft place, to remind you of something sacred. You are not your explanations. You never had to convince anyone in order to be worthy of love. And sometimes, the most powerful act of self-love is simply to stay silent. So now, I invite you, if these words touch something inside you, to share in the comments. When was the first time you felt the need to explain yourself just to feel safe? And ask yourself, what would happen if today you chose silence instead? And in that silence, you found your way back to yourself. If this message resonated with your soul, please support this channel with a like. It may seem like a small thing, but it helps us keep building this space for depth, truth, and emotional healing. For you, and for thousands of others who need it. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next video, because it's already on its way. Another step on your journey back home. Because as Carl Jung once said, what you resist persists. What you accept transforms. And you, my dear soul, are ready to transform.